Hey, how's it going guys? Welcome to our review of Gone Viral. Words by Neale Upton, narrated by Tom Baker. We're going to tell you everything you need to know before you play. But before we do, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell for more video game reviews every single week. You're not going to want to miss it. It feels like a week doesn't pass in which the game industry is buzzing from the release of another roguelike title. The genre's popularity has soared in the last decade as gamers have demanded bigger challenges and more bang for their buck. There's a roguelike for everyone, with an enormous multitude of titles expressing so many little variations on the formula that it's almost impossible not to find one you'll like. Stepping up to the foray to contend for your time now is Skullbot Games' first title, Gone Viral. Dropped into what feels like a Running Man-style fight for your right to live game show, Gone Viral offers a small roster of characters for you to choose from in order to try and kill your way to freedom. As part of the setup, you're playing to appease the viewers and fans alike, and killing enemies in a certain way will eventually grant you loot boxes, filled with upgrades, equipment, or potentially just misfortune if you're unlucky. The game will be instantly familiar to anyone that's played a roguelike in the last handful of years, which isn't to say it's unoriginal, but as far as gameplay, it can feel a little uninspired at times. The biggest difference between this game and incredibly popular titles like The Binding of Isaac is in their dimensions. Gone Viral's 3D environment and physics do a lot to set it apart, offering something quite unique. Some of the best parts of the game lie within the physics engine, letting you play environmental hazards against your enemies. Pushing barrels into a group of foes and watching them scatter after the explosion is hugely satisfying, as is simply knocking them into a pitfall trap to send them to a gruesome end. This little addition adds another layer of dynamic gameplay to what could have otherwise been a fairly standard roguelike. You occasionally encounter room events voted for by the AI viewers, in which a room will have a certain set of rules which mix up how you approach the fight. For example, a room event entitled Rush speeds up the movement of everyone in the room, in theory allowing you to play faster and more aggressive at the expense of taking more damage if you're careless. The addition of Twitch integration will no doubt make for a lot of interesting runs, as your viewers can vote to make your life easier or harder on a whim. However, there are some pretty big shortcomings. The AI quite often displays a complete lack of self-preservation, particularly the lowly orc enemies. A handful of times in a single level, they would flail blindly towards the fire traps, seemingly hell-bent on self-immolation, or they'd swing their way through an explosive barrel and detonate themselves and all their friends around them. Quite honestly, it's pretty fun to watch, though it happens so often you wonder whether it's a feature or a bug. Hit markers for things like bombs can also at times feel incredibly unforgiving. Boss battles definitely suffer from this the most, where you're more likely to encounter these kinds of projectiles. Despite feeling like I should have been way out of harm's way, I'd often still take damage. This is probably meant to be mitigated by using the invulnerability period granted by dodging, but it still feels pretty off at times. And sometimes, as can be common with these kinds of games, there's just a bit too much happening on the screen. This is likely to vary from player to player, but people unfamiliar with these types of titles might be easily overwhelmed by the amount of projectiles floating around on screen. No doubt, this is probably something you can overcome by spending more time with the game, but it would be really helpful to have something that set enemies apart from the environment. It's hard to say what the latter stages of the game will offer right now, as so far only 2 characters and 3 levels are playable in the closed beta, but I'm cautiously optimistic that Gone Viral is going to be a great addition to the current roster of roguelikes available. Further down the line, this is likely one to check out, and for what it's worth, it does seem quite promising so far. More than anything, what you're going to get out of this game likely comes down to whether you're tired of other games like this, or if you've got room in your life for another roguelike. Although Gone Viral doesn't add anything hugely different to the genre, it'll certainly satiate fans looking for something familiar to sink their teeth into. But what did you think of Gone Viral? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more video game reviews every single week. See you next time.